Wow. Okay, so you experienced all five form levels of abuse.
Yes, I have. And a lot of people aren't aware that there are five forms of abuse. So the five forms are physical, emotional, psychological, economic, and sexual.
Wow.
So those are the five forms of abuse.
When you were experiencing those things, did you know that they were abuse, or did you later find out that they were forms of abuse?
No, I did not know that there were forms of abuse. And when I was experiencing it, I had no idea that it had a name, especially as a child. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in the projects. And just as I mentioned, the sexual abuse began from female and male babysitter. And I remember clearly, the things that happened to me as a child, but I had no idea that I was being abused. So as time went by, I sort of grew a wall. I built a wall, and I just lived my life not really knowing that those bad things that happened to me was bad things and that it was abuse.
Did you share this with anybody in your family, or was it later in life that you were able to confess about this?
No, I didn't share it with anyone in my family. And even later on in life, I didn't share it because I always felt that no one would believe me. Like if I shared it with my mom, I grew up in a single parent home, and I had no idea that it was abuse. So if I had shared those bad things that happened to me, I didn't think that anyone would believe me.
Do you think there was shame connected with that?
At that time, I wasn't intact with my emotions, so I really don't know what I was feeling. All I remember is that, looking back, there was a sense of sadness. I did have happiness in my life, don't get me wrong, growing up as a child, but I always felt that, there was something different about me. And I didn't know if I experienced any sense of shame or anger or anything, anxiety. I didn't know, that I had those feelings, and I probably was going through them, but I had no idea what the names of them were or that I was going through anything.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry you went through that. There's you as a child. What age were you here about here?
Yes, that was me as a child. I was in kindergarten, and that's when it all began, the sexual abuse from my second babysitter. I was a little younger with a male babysitter, and that's when it all began.
Was it confusing for you to realize, I know you were a child then, but looking maybe even back on it, is it confusing to you to realize that a man did it and then a woman also did it? Because I think a lot of times people are under the notion that only men are abusers in that case of sexual abuse.
Yes, that's true what you said, but there was just no connection with me as far as male or female. It was just that those things happened to me.
Right.
The babysitter.
You weren't looking at it from that lens. I get that.
No, I wasn't looking at it from that lens. It was just that bad things was happening to me. And I just remember clearly, the location with the male and the location with the female. And they both were babysitters, and they were family friends of our family.
Gosh, I hate that.
Both kids. Yes, their parents, their moms were, good friends with my mom, and she trusted them to take care of me, and they were doing things to me, and they made me do things to them. I remember clearly with the female babysitter, the dark room that she had me in and the things that she was telling me to do and things of that nature. And it was so confusing for me, especially as a child. Here, I'm doing things and I'm not understanding, what these things are. And unfortunately, just the feeling and the touching and the smell of everything. And she tried to make it seem like it was a game, but it wasn't a game. And it was horrific for me. And I just didn't like going to this babysitter's home, but I had no other choice because at the time, my mom, she needed a break. She wanted to go out with my stepfather at the time, for date night and things of that nature. But they never knew that these things were happening. I never said anything.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's the case for a lot of victims as children, that they don't say anything?
It is the case, but every child, they go through that experience with their own experiences, meaning their like how they how they cope with it, how it affects them, and everybody is different. So even though we have the same experience, but every story is told differently, and every experience is different, even though the stories might sound the same, familiar. And for me, I just built a wall, and I was very quiet, and I didn't know how to express myself, and I didn't have a voice. I didn't know that there was a such thing of having a voice.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
and I didn't learn that,
until years later.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. So where was your father, your biological father, in this? I know that in your book you shared some of the things that he went through. And
correct. My biological father, he wasn't an existing father. So, he was an alcoholic. Unfortunately, he did drugs. He was homeless. And he was very abusive and aggressive as well. And unfortunately, he abused, my mom. Yeah. So he wasn't a part of our lives. He probably popped in, showed up every once in a while, but he wasn't a fixture in our home.
And you shared in your book that he experienced abuse as well. And we talked a little bit pre-show about a generational cycle that seems to happen with abusers, and they become abusers and so on.
Yes, he did experience abuse as a child as well. And unfortunately, his siblings, too, from his parents. Unfortunately, my grandfather, his dad, sexually abused, a couple of my aunts. And unfortunately, they were more so physically abusive to him. And there's one story that I share with him as a child, that if he was too loud or, played games as a child inside of their home, unfortunately for him, my grandparents would shove him in a closet, and if he started screaming or crying or anything like that, unfortunately, what they did to him was they poured hot water on him just to get him to be quiet. So, as a child, his abuse started as early as a child also. So, unfortunately, that was the abuse that he experienced from his parents, was a learned behavior, and it was like normal. And he became an abusive person as well. And unfortunately, it was my mother that he abused physically and emotionally and psychologically and economically. He would beat her, and he would leave and not come home, and he was in and out of jobs. He didn't work, or, sometimes he did work. She always felt that he could have been a good provider, but had it not been for the drugs and alcohol, and the reason he did the drugs and alcohol probably is because he was soothing that pain, from the abuse that he experienced. So it's just a cycle. It's a generational thing, with abuse, unfortunately.
Being a Christian now and being redeemed by Christ and where you're at now in your journey, do you have a certain kind of grace and understanding for your father because of the fact of, like you're saying, it's a generational thing and it's what he experienced, so he then projects that onto others? Or is there a certain level of accountability that needs to be had that, just because you experienced this as a kid doesn't mean you need to also do this when you're an adult? Like, where do we draw the line at? Is it just completely grace and understanding, or do we need to walk in a different direction because we know how toxic, turmoil, and tragic that was on me as a child?
Right. I have learned through my walk with Christ, and also through the support, through me deciding that I had to acknowledge and tell the truth so that I could heal. So after I became saved, I learned that it wasn't okay what my dad did, but I understand his mind and his thoughts and the actions. I'm not saying that it was okay, because it was not okay. It is not okay. But as a child, the horrific trauma that he experienced from the physical and the emotional abuse, that explains his behavior and why he treated relationships the way that he did. And I've given him a lot of grace. And, with the abandonment and rejection as well that I experienced from my dad, I had to learn that I could love him, from a distance. Unfortunately, my father, he's no longer with us. He passed away some years ago. But prior to him passing away, there was a time in my life where I really wanted to have a relationship with him, and I did reach out to him. And I loved my father. Yes, he did those horrible things to me, but he was still my dad, And through my walk with Christ, I learned what it's like to have grace, compassion, and mercy for other people. The story about Jesus, when he's being abused and rocks are being thrown at him and he's being spit at and horrible words as he's carrying that cross, to his final destination. And when he was nailed on the cross, and the things that he said when he was on the cross, as he looked down at the crowd, at his mother and everyone else, that they did not know what they were doing. And when you hear something that powerful, how can you not follow Jesus' lead? How can you not do that?
Absolutely. Amen.
So that's how I learned about the grace and the compassion and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my journey has also been about learning how to lay everything at the cross and just forgive. Forgive, it's really, truly an important thing to do as you're going through that process of healing.
Wow, so good. I love that, because forgiveness is always, I love it when it's said like this. It's, if you hold on to bitterness and you don't forgive, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to feel the results, because you're just living with that inner turmoil and that anger against them, and it's only bringing you unrest and unpeace rather than them. So it's like, it's not doing anything to them, it's more so impacting you by having unforgiveness in your heart.
That's so true. Excuse me. And what a lot of people don't realize, forgiveness, it truly isn't for the abuser. Forgiveness is for you. Because by it being for you, it frees you from that anger, from that anxiety, from that fear, from that shame, from whatever it is that you're thinking and you're feeling. It frees you from that. And if you can just allow for yourself to be free, oh man.
It's different.
It really, truly is different. You have no idea how powerful forgiveness is if you don't practice it.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. It's hard, because you think about, but he did this, he did that, he said this, or she, they said that. You got to let it go. You have to free yourself so that you can move forward in life.
Mm-hmm.
and so that you can be free and just learn that it's okay to say no. It's okay to build boundaries. It's okay to use your voice.
So good.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that you said that. And it just shows where you're at now in your walk too. For somebody to have your story to come out on the other side and be preaching forgiveness is a beautiful thing to witness. And so let's fast forward a little bit past the sexual abuse and get to another form of abuse that you experienced in your journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, I experienced in one of my relationships, unfortunately, I hate saying this, but I was married twice. And in that second relationship, it was such a dysfunctional and abusive relationship and time in my life. And it was as if, wow, I was just a completely different person.
What age was this, would you say?
Do I really have to tell my age?
No, you don't. I'm just trying to get a picture of early 20s. You could say in the ballpark range.
Latter.
Latter?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
I was my second marriage. It was more so in my, 40s.
Okay.
Yeah, I was abused. That was a very bad relationship. Well, I was going into my 40s. That was a very abusive relationship because it was with a man that did not know Christ. And at that time, I did know Christ. I did go to church every once in a while, but I didn't have a relationship with Christ, and I didn't understand what it was like. But it was that marriage, actually, when I came to Christ, because I had hit rock bottom in my life.
There you go.
Yes.
Okay, come on.
So,
They used it for your good.
absolutely. So if it had not been for that marriage, I don't know. I don't know if we would be here today talking or not. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
So and that's the power of it. You know, he uses all things for our good, and he turns graves into gardens, and he redeems our timeline. So it sounds like that's kind of what he did for you, despite the chaos and the turmoil and the storms and the abuse you experienced.
Absolutely. But I had to go through them in order for me to find Christ. And then when I hit rock bottom and ended up going to church, that's when God brought so many beautiful Christian women into my life.
Wow.
You know, with that relationship, it was so dysfunctional, and unfortunately, my kids experienced secondhand abuse from it. And it was awful. You know, he would do things like we didn't share bank accounts together. And the only reason that we ended up sharing an account together is because he needed me for something. You know, he wasn't a citizen of the United States. And he and his children, they needed green cards. And he needed me to marry me so that they could receive their green cards. Yeah.
That's starting like a manipulative relationship, if that's like the intention.
It was very manipulative, and I had no idea that it was. And I was in too deep, meaning, you know, when we started dating, he was kind and a wonderful person. And then and then when I ended up moving in with him and my kids as well, it seemed like he changed. So I did see the red flags. I did have like that gut feeling that you get, but I stuffed it because at that time I felt that I needed him. I had no idea that I didn't need him. All I needed was God and have a relationship with God and allow for him to help me by bringing, you know, different people into my life to help me just know that I didn't have to be in an abusive relationship. So at that time, I was so insecure, and I just felt that I needed him because I had 2 kids that I had to take care of. And during that time, unfortunately, their father, you know, I wasn't receiving anything from him, no alimony or child support or anything, until maybe a year later. Then he started giving me money, you know, to support the kids, but it still wasn't enough. So I felt that I allowed for myself to stay in that situation. So he would do things like give me a credit card. He never gave me cash. We didn't share a bank account together, but when we did, he only put $50 in it, but that was only for ICE to see, not ICE, but what is it, immigration?
Oh, okay.
The immigration offices,
Got you.
excuse me, to see so that they could see that we were a couple. And I was kind of forced into.
You're a paperwork wife.
Yes. I was forced into it because I was at a point of my life that was such a toxic relationship that I didn't want to sponsor him, and I did not want to sponsor his kids because of how I was treated, the abuse that I experienced, and what my kids saw, and it just wasn't right.
So you would consider that financial abuse?
Economic abuse.
Economic abuse. Okay. Talk about that. I feel like there's a big misconception or ununderstanding of what that actually is.
Well, I just basically, I was in and out of jobs, and I didn't have access to much money. So I knew that I had to support my kids, and he did not support me or my children. It was one of those situations that he felt that as long as I had a roof over my head and my kids had a roof over their heads, that was fine. But inside of the home, it was so toxic. It wasn't a good situation, inside of the home. And if we went grocery shopping or anything like that, he controlled everything. He would buy the groceries and things of that nature.
You shared one story with me pre-show about your clothes, and
yes.
you want to share that real quick? Because that was like wild to me.
Yeah, so he was upset with me regarding something, and he felt that my punishment should be him stripping me of all of my clothes. So what he did was he ended up taking all of my clothes out of my closet, and he hid them, my clothes and my shoes, and he hid them. And I had no access to anything to wear, so I had to wear my daughter's clothing because that was his way of punishing me.
I can tell that one really impacts you.
It really did. It was very hurtful for me. It really was. And a friend of mine, she helped me find a job. So, I got a job, but unfortunately I, had to wear my daughter's clothes because I was at a point where I really was trying to get out of that relationship. So it was very confusing for me, and it was very hard for me because I had 2 kids to support, and it was very, very difficult. So I tried to do, everything that I possibly could to talk to my kids about it and explain to them that the relationship that we had, it was not a normal relationship.
Yeah, because they're seeing all that, and they're thinking that that's like the norm. And I've had somebody close to me in my family that got to witness years of a crappy boyfriend to their spouse or their significant other. And so that girl, my niece, essentially got to see that over and over again, and I just always am like praying that like she doesn't think that's how a relationship should be, you know. I pray that she's able to find a good guy that like gives her a whole new vision of what how a man should treat a woman in a relationship, And so sounds like you didn't want your kids to see that, but they were seeing that secondhand. That's kind of what you said. So what is the rock bottom moment in that, and how did you break away from that relationship?
The rock bottom moment for me was when I was arrested. Yeah, and I had to spend a night in jail. And
What'd you do? You pop off? You hit him with a frying pan?
No, I did not pop off or hit him with a frying pan, Zach.
All right. Have to throw a little humor in there?
I did not do that, no.
All right.
No, my daughter came home from school, and at the time she was in middle school. And you know how teenagers are. She was having a rough time at school. She played sports and things of that nature, and she just wasn't in the best mood. So I tried to talk to her. So I would, go to her and just ask her to open up and talk to me. She didn't want to do it. I did it several times. And at the time, my ex-husband, my second husband, he was in his office and he could hear the conversations going. And he could also hear the tone in my daughter's voice. And he did not like that tone in his voice. He felt that she was being disrespectful, but I didn't see it that way. She was just expressing herself. She was a teenager, with all the hormones and things of that nature. She's going through something. She doesn't want to talk, and I'm trying to get it out of her, and she's still not wanting to talk. So he decided to step in and just tell her that he didn't like, the tone of her voice. And he took away, an event that my son and daughter were going to at their school. And at the time, the school that they went to, it was a private school. And their basketball team won the state championship game. So it was one of those situations where the school shuts down and everybody can go and support the team. So he took that away from her. And it was always our agreement, when it came to his kids, that he disciplined his kids. When it came to my kids, I disciplined my children, because I did not like how he disciplined his children, because I always felt that he was too aggressive with them and he was too hard on them. And growing up as a child, the physical abuse that I experienced, I never wanted to be that kind of parent to my children. So I believed in, you talk to your kids, you give them time out, you punish them. So that's how, I did things. So
and he would just jump straight to punishment kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it would be over the top, so aggressive and
Extra,
over the top.
Extra. Controlling,
Very controlling.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that was over the top. Him stepping in after, our conversations that we've had and the agreements that we had, and him taking away her being able to do that. So this was on a Wednesday. By that Friday, because that's when the States games, was taking place. So we woke up that morning, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. I got dressed and I told my daughter that she was able to go to the game, get cleaned up, get dressed. And her punishment was going to be her riding in the car with me so that we can have some sort of, one-on-one time with each other, maybe by her being excited about going to the game, and she'll just open up and start talking to me. So that was sort of like my mindset. So after I was dressed, he woke up and asked me where I was going. And I told him, we're going to go to the state championship game, And he just went ballistic. He exploded. I knew you were going to do this, give me, my card. So, because as I shared with you, his form of punishment for me, he never gave me cash. He would give me his credit card. But if he didn't like something that I've said or something that I've done or did not do, he would take that credit card back from me. So he said, give me my credit card. So instead of him allowing for me to reach inside of my handbag, I had it on my shoulder at that time, ready, to leave. He ended up grabbing my bag and running into the bathroom with it, our bathroom with it. So I turned around and I saw my 2 kids and my stepson. They're all standing in our doorway just witnessing everything that's happening. And when he grabbed my purse, it scared me because I thought, not only will he take his credit card from me, he'll probably take my car keys too. So I reacted to what he did. He woke up, he was in his underpants, and I reached out, and at the time I had extremely long nails, and I grabbed him by his underpants to try to stop him. Zach, this this is the first time that I told this story and somebody laughed.
I'm sorry. I like to laugh.
So you're visualizing
I am visualizing
everything.
this. Yeah,
okay,
this is hilarious.
So
this is good.
He's in his Fruit of the Looms, white underwear. And when I reached out, I inadvertently scratched his back. But I had no idea that I scratched his back. So during that time, I asked my daughter to call the police. So, she used her cell phone. She called the police.
Don't tell
And the
me
reason,
this, dude.
okay, let me tell you. So I asked her to call the police. And the reason that I wanted, to call the police, because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that was sort of like a low moment for me, because it just got to the point where I thought, you know what? I'm just tired of him treating me the way that he's treating me. And I'm tired of the abuse. And all I wanted and all I hoped for when the police came was for them to just have a conversation with him and ask him, hey, why are you treating your wife this way? Why are you abusing her this way? And I was hoping that they would let him see that he was abusing me. So that was going on in my mind. Yeah. So she called the police. She ended up handing me the phone, and they asked me to step outside, which I did. And I was still talking to the operator on the other side. It was the operator that I was speaking to. And they ended up showing up. There were like 6, 7, 8 police cars lined up, down the street. I was shocked at what I saw, when I came outside, because the response was really quick.
And that's a lot of cops for a domestic call.
Yeah, it was a lot. So when I stepped outside, I identified myself, and there were 2 police officers just right outside in our driveway. And I was just sharing with them, everything that took place. So they told me to just stay outside, and the other police officer ended up going inside of our home because he wanted to interview my ex-husband. And I could see that they had like the little earpieces on, and they were communicating back and forth. And all of a sudden, the other police officer came out, and he just basically said, this is such an unfortunate situation, but we're going to have to arrest you. And the reason they arrested me was because of the scratches they saw on my ex-husband's back, which I didn't know at the time. So they ended up handcuffing me and taking me to the police station. And I was there for a couple of hours. The police officer said that I was going to have to go before a judge, and that I was just going to have to stay there until I went before a judge. And mind you, this was on a Friday, so I didn't think anything about it. And I'm there maybe 3-4 hours, and all of a sudden they're saying that they're going to have to transport me to another location. And I asked why. And they said, well, you're still going to have to go before a judge. And at that time, that's when they started fingerprinting me at that one location. And they took a picture of me at that location. And I just broke out in tears, because my ex-husband, he didn't, come to bail me out or anything. I was just there all day. So the police officer said, you know what, if I were you, I wouldn't be crying, because you can't let, the people that are there see you crying, because they're taking me to another location. That other location was the big house in Florida on Gun Road. So it was the real prison. And they handcuffed me, put me in the back of the car, and just drove me over there. And I thought that I would be leaving maybe later on. And again, I'm in a cell, after we arrive, I'm in this cell with other people. And I'm just sitting there, the police officer is calling people, calling names, letting them, certain people were leaving. So I'm thinking, okay, hopefully they'll be calling me soon. the next thing I knew, the whole day went by, and then they were announcing that they'll be transporting us to another area there, and we'll be sleeping in a dormitory. Something, oh, okay, maybe, I'll have a little dormitory. I had no idea that it was like a cell block. In my mind, a dormitory, maybe a room that's inside of there, because I've never been arrested before, and it's one of those situations where
Wow.
they take us, we had to strip our clothes, and it was the most humiliating thing ever, having to just, be stripped of your clothes, and they allow for us to shower, and then they showed us, our mattresses, and, put us in another area in the, inside of the jail house. It was humiliating.
Absolutely.
It was humiliating.
Don't you wish now that you actually hit him with the frying pan instead of just scratched him?
No, because I would have stayed.
Did the truth eventually come out?
The truth, it did come out. It was my attorney that told me that the thing that got it was the scratches on the back, and I had no clue.
Yeah, you just had long nails and you were just reaching.
Yep. Yep, trying to stop him from running off with my purse.
And that should be like out of 7 police officers, they should have saw that as more defense wounds than attacking wounds. You know what I mean? It's
the thing of it is, the police.
Doing?
Yeah, you would have thought so, but the police officer asked me, "Why are you in an abusive marriage?" He knew that I was being abused, and he did ask me that question. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Zach, I did not know how to answer that question. I didn't know. I did feel ashamed. Yeah, but I just didn't know.
Do you feel like we'll get back to the rock bottom in a second, but do you feel like when somebody has so he was like, obviously, it sounds like he hit a few different of the 5, right? Of the 5 different forms in that second marriage. So he economical, mental, emotional, physical at all?
No physical.
No physical?
No sexual.
Okay.
No.
Do you think, though, that if you stayed in, that those other 2 would have potentially been tapped into as well?
It would have been tapped into, but not from him, from his son. Because he allowed for his son to, just degrade me with his words and would not defend me or anything like that.
Oh, wow.
So, and his son, basically, this is when he was in high school, in his teenage years. Last year of high school, he basically would get in my face and scream and yell and just basically say, I'll spit in your face. So it was that abusive.
Okay.
And it did get to the point where I was calling the police on his son because I didn't feel safe in the home.
My goodness. Okay, so the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in that case. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So there's a lot.
Yeah,
and
I know.
Everything that I'm sharing with you, it's in my book. Yeah.
So
I talk openly about everything because I felt that I wanted to be as vulnerable as possible and share these stories with hope that someone could resonate from one of the stories that I'm sharing with them. And if they didn't know that, they are in an abusive relationship, it can kind of get their minds going and them thinking by saying, oh my gosh, this story, this sounds so familiar, but it's with my life.
Yeah. And that's the power of testimony. Somebody else has been impacted by it in a similar way. And so make sure you guys watching right now, you go to Amazon, you can pick up Ruth's book, Journey of Hope. We have the link in the description for you. You can just click on that link and it'll take you straight there, and you can pick it up there on Amazon. Paperback $16.99, and hardcover is somewhere up there as well. So make sure you get your hands on that copy. We're going to keep talking to Ava and just diving in, to Ruth, and keep diving into her story. And we have a comment that came in from my friend Rayma. She said, "This is such an important testimony to share." Come on. Thank you so much for tuning in today, Miss Rayma. We appreciate everybody that's watching on the live stream today. If you guys can, make sure, I know everybody, you working and having lunch breaks and stuff, but tune in sometime, drop a comment, let us know where you're watching from. If you're listening to this at another time, you can also let us know where you're watching from, and we always like to go through the comments and see where the show is impacting people most. So Ruth, so rock bottom moment, jail, trying to get out of this marriage now, finding Christ. Where do you go next from there?
Yes. So jail was my rock bottom moment. And when I was in my cell, I was afraid to go to sleep because there were other women inside of the cell block with me. And all I did was prayed. In all sorts of thoughts, was going through my mind because I was thinking, what if I get lost in a system and I never get out? And it was just a horrible, humiliating time for me. And I was so ashamed because I never thought that something like this could happen to me. Yeah, I never thought in a million years that this would happen.
Especially you being the victim all those years, and it's like you're the one in prison. That's got to be a mental.
Yes, it was. It was sort of like a double-edged sword. By this happening, so it was horrible. Yeah, and I just prayed to Jesus, just be with me, just keep me safe, just don't let me get lost in a system and me have to stay here. And I was just praying, please just let me let me get out of here as quickly as possible because I had to go before the judge in order for me to leave. But the Lord did answer my prayers when I was there. And the next morning, they woke all of us up and they shackled us, put handcuffs and shackled us to walk over to the courtroom to go before the judge. And fortunately, I was the first person to see the judge. So as I think about it, it was a blessing in disguise for me right there because, there were several women, in that cell block. So I could have been the last and ended up spending, the whole day there again. But I was the first person that the judge saw. And that's when I was released.
Thankfully, they were in a good mood that day.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. I was so happy when they let me out. But unfortunately, after leaving.
You got to go home.
Well, when I was in jail, there was a restraining order drawn up against me, so I had nowhere to go. So I was homeless.
So your husband did that?
Yep. I received it. I received it when I was in jail before we went to the dormitories. It was
restraining order from you.
Yeah,
wow.
I received a restraining
order.
Talk
about projecting.
So I know. So it was a restraining order from him, and there was also a restraining order from the state. So in the state of Florida, if there's some sort of domestic abuse, that's being brought, case, that the state kicked in. So I was not allowed to go back home. So my kids and I were homeless. And let me share this with you. So a good friend of my daughter, her mom is who took care of my kids when I was in jail. So she ended up taking them to the house so that they could get some clothes. And she just decided that she would let them stay with her, So what he did was when she took the kids to the house, my ex-husband ended up putting a chain and lock on the door to prevent the kids from coming in the house. So he basically kicked them out after all of that happened. So she had to call the police and have the police come to the house again the same day so that they can at least go inside of the house and get clothes so that she could take care of them.
Wow.
Yeah. So secondhand abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a horrible situation for my children. I felt so bad for them. It just hurt me. It broke my heart. It hurt me so much.
I don't want to miss this opportunity. Tell our audience what your kids are up to now.
Oh, well, they're doing extremely well. My son, he's a pastor, and he heads up a church in Florida. And my daughter, she's a teacher. She's a tutor and a teacher. And they both are Christians. They gave their lives to Christ.
Come on.
And she models. And yeah, they're doing extremely well now.
Impacting
He's married.
the youth. Come on.
And has a beautiful child, and my daughter, she's single, and so they're doing extremely well.
That's awesome. Well,
They
I
are.
love to hear that, and I think that's an important part of the story because, obviously you're saying they experienced that, and I just wanted to share with our audience how well they're doing, because I remember we
Yes.
talked on the phone and you were telling me about that.
Yes, they are doing well. Yes, but I must share that they've had like their problems. It was a struggle for them also, but they overcame it. Yeah.
In Christ Jesus, come on.
Yep.
So good. Okay, so when did you feel the need to start sharing your story?
It was shortly after I became saved, and Christ brought so many beautiful Christian women into my life, and they sort of guided me. And it was them that I learned that, I had struggles with the sexual abuse that I experienced, the abandonment and rejection, and me seeking love and significance outside of our home, like relationships and things of that nature. And I had no idea that it affected me. But after I started doing support groups and therapy and things of that nature, that's when I learned.
You started getting the language for it, essentially? You started kind of being able to get the words to represent what you were feeling or what you went through?
Yes. That's when I learned that, I was angry, as I was going through the support group. When you go through these support groups, one of the groups that I've done was for sexual abuse. And, I just was so silent during that time. And I learned that you can have a voice and you can express, what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And during that time, I did get triggers, and I learned how to be in touch with what I'm feeling at that time. If I was feeling sad, I'm feeling really unhappy, really sad right now. Or if I got a trigger and something made me angry, I can honestly say that made me angry. Or if I felt ashamed about something, I can be honest and say, wow, I felt so ashamed that this happened to me and that I did that, but it wasn't my fault. So I had to learn it wasn't my fault.
How long did that take you to learn?
It took me a while. It didn't happen overnight. It took years.
Yeah, because one of the things I was going to ask you, and I don't really know how to articulate it well for some reason, but it almost seems like you went through the abuse as a child, and yet you still somehow found a way to be involved in an abusive situation again. So do you think that that's also a pattern or a cycle to it's almost like that's how you feel like you're worth? Or is there an identity issue in that? Or do you think it's just happenstance?
Right. Well, I did wonder, why my life was so different from other kids. Growing up as a kid, why they had a dad. Was I pretty enough? Was I good enough? Was I smart enough? Excuse me. And that wasn't the case. It was just that I saw something different. It was different because I didn't have it in my household. And as far as my picker was broken. So the kind of men that came in my life, I had no idea at that time that they were kind of like my dad, meaning, with the abuse that he experienced and how he abused my mom. They were abusive men also, but it was more of the emotional abuse that I experienced. I was always in relationships where I gave more and they gave nothing. So I thought that if I'm good, and if I show you how much I care about you and how much I love you, then you will love me back. You would give me the love that I so desperately needed, because I truly needed to be loved. That's what I felt. I just felt that I was not a loved child because I never received love from my father, my biological father.
Yeah.
And after I became saved, I learned that my heavenly Father truly loves me.
Come on.
And he's there for me, and he's guiding me. But it took some time for me to learn it.
So how does somebody that's listening to this right now, who's walked a similar path as you, who has experienced similar things, who has those childhood wounds still, how does somebody heal that inner little girl inside of them?
Wow. How someone heals that little girl inside of them. I believe that first you have to acknowledge that you're in whatever situation it is that you are in. You have to acknowledge it and tell the truth about it and allow for yourself to heal from it. That's the only thing that you can do. And not only that, if you have a beautiful relationship with Christ, allow for him to lead you and just lay it at lay everything at the cross, because I could not have done it without him. I can honestly say I could not have, overcome, everything that I experienced without him. And it was what I learned. I learned that I am significant in Christ. I've learned that I have security in Christ. I learned that I'm accepted in Christ and that he loves me and that he's there for me. And I learned that all I had to do was just say yes to Christ for him to come into my life and change me as a person, change my heart, change my mind, change my soul.
So you felt like when you were surrendering those things to him at the cross, that he was, with time and with trusting him, he was pulling those things out of you, and he was covering those wounds by the blood, and he was doing things for you that you could have never done yourself.
Yes. Absolutely.
I love that.
That's exactly what he was doing. Yeah. And of course, I didn't know that he was doing it until, it all had to do with like me finally realizing who I am, because at that time I didn't know, who I was. If you asked me, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you feel like confessing it to him was first, or did you feel like confessing it to people was first?
Well, I confessed it to him, because I just prayed, because I just didn't want to be in that dark place. And I learned that God, he does not want you to live in a dark place. He brought us on this earth to live in light, for us to love each other and have good relationships with each other. He wants the very best for his children. He doesn't want us to struggle. He doesn't want us to be hurt. Yes, had he been able to keep us from it? No. But it's those experiences where he comes into your life and, you just have to accept him, accept that nudge, listen to that small voice that's talking to you, so that, you can just free yourself from whatever it is.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
That's encouraging. What are some final words that you think an audience member needs to hear today in regards to this story?
Final words. I think that just learn how to love yourself and just dive into who he is. Give your love and your whole being to him, and just allow for him to guide your steps. It's not easy, to acknowledge these things. And even when you do acknowledge them, there's a pain behind it when you acknowledge them. And who wants to go through that pain? But unfortunately, you have to walk through that pain in order to get to the other side. And in order, just to free yourself. And in order to learn how to just love yourself and build relationships and know that it's okay to, have boundaries and not allow for yourself to stay in relationships if it's not good for you, because you deserve the best.
That's right.
You deserve the best.
And I think that's why the scriptures are so clear about not being unequally yoked, with somebody, because it's like we're supposed to line ourselves up with people who also believe in Christ, and we're supposed to surround ourselves with people who are walking with Christ as well, to uplift us and be the salt and light in our lives that we need to be the best version of ourselves. And I believe God has somebody for you for that. And I truly feel that right now. I feel the Lord whispering like he's still redeeming that timeline for you. And you're going to get all those things that you lost, all those things are going to come back tenfold in a positive way for you.
Well, it has, because I'm in a beautiful relationship now. So it has came back tenfold. And not only that,
it's awesome.
Not only that, he's my Boaz. Is it Boaz?
It's Boaz.
He's my Boaz. I'm sorry, I could never say the word. That's another Ruth Valor. My Boaz came. Yes.
Wow. That's amazing.
He's my Boaz. Yeah,
well, I'm so
he really
glad.
truly is.
Well, praise God for that. And I'm so grateful to hear that. That really uplifts my spirit today to know that.
Yep.
Well, Ruth, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story, your heart, your pain, and your new purpose in Christ to be able to help other people walking through this. You have an organization I want to tell people about as well, Journey of Hope. What is that organization?
Yes, journeyofhope.net. And our mission is, what we're doing is spreading awareness about the 5 forms of abuse that's affecting many Americans. So we strive to bring hope and restoration through our life support series programs to victims as well as abusers. So under the umbrella of Journey of Hope, we offer different programs. One is for sexual abuse. It's called Shelter from the Storm. We also do a post-abortive program to allow for you to free yourself from holding on to, if you've had an abortion or if you've lost a child. God, he still truly loves you. And it also helps you forgive yourself for those choices. And we have a Freedom in Christ program, which is a discipleship program if you've stirred away from God, or if you want a relationship with God, and a life skills program. Wow. So
that's
yes, we
amazing
offer different programs, and they're all Bible-based programs, and they're studies that you have to do homework, and then we get together in a small, intimate setting, go through everything, and everybody just pretty much share what's on their mind.
Wow, that's amazing. And thank you for doing that. Thank you for using your pain to have a greater purpose for other people and to help other people with your story and to give God glory along the way. It's a beautiful thing. So
thank you.
Everybody, make sure you go check that out. It's journeyofhope.net, and reach out if this show impacted you. Go check out that website. Go check out her book to get more into the stories that we talked about today. And I just want to thank you guys for being here today and listening to this whole testimony. You know, it's powerful to get through something like this, and we know it can be hard on the heart. You know, especially if you've walked in something similar to this. But I believe that there's freedom on the other side of this episode. So I really appreciate you guys being here. Smash the like button if this is your first time here. Make sure you subscribe. As well as, what is that sound? They're doing construction here. I guess. Okay, we have a comment that came in. Let's see what it says. It says, you can't differentiate when you are raised to be an object what is wrong behavior. If it was all you known, there are no red flags. All you know is to disassociation, learning what it is to be loved. All right. I like that. It's good input. All right, we have this weird sound going on. They're doing construction at this building, so we're gonna dip out there. If you guys want to support us, you can go to patreon.com/ILikeBirds. Make sure you join our community on there. It's a very good platform to be able to just get deeper connected to the ministry, and as well as we just want to thank you guys again so much for being here. Watch this final video.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Podcast sponsorships truly are. And here's what I mean. Every business should have a marketing goal that involves reaching people who don't know their business exists. In the world of social media, people scroll by ads without thinking twice about it, and Mark Zuckerberg gets rich because sometimes people accidentally click on them, and you, as the business owner, pays for that click. Some ads are effective and work, but I've wasted so much money on ads over the years and I saw such little return. And I learned this truth. There is power in being directly in someone's ear from a voice that they trust. And let's be honest, you're more likely to buy a book if a friend recommends it to you than you are if you see an ad for it on your For You page. The same principle applies to your business. When you partner with a podcast that is reaching thousands of people on a weekly basis, it means your business is also reaching thousands of people on a weekly basis. So if this is an idea that you've already been toying with, reach out to me and let's see how that we can partner together to get your brand heard on my growing faith-based podcast called I Like Birds that has reached over 30 million people on all platforms in the last year alone. We do it for the one, and we believe that we can help you reach the one as well. So send me the word sponsorship and we can get the ball rolling. Cheers.